Stephen, it's nice to see you, man. How are things?
Well, personally, great. I mean, the world is falling apart, but my little corner is relatively okay for the moment. You know, how
The
about you?
yeah, things are solid. Like I said, I'm lucky that my brain chemistry was wired for catastrophe, and also I grew up listening to I believe I grew up listening to the right kind of music. So none of what's happening in the world is particularly surprising to me because all the stuff that I grew up listening to told me this was coming. So I'm used to it.
Right.
I don't need
I
to
don't.
ask you why.
What was the
Go
band
ahead.
that did? What was the band that talked about American collapse? That one like, I guess they all did, right? Right. But
Yeah, if you listen to punk rock in the 70s and
yeah,
80s, this was all coming. I don't need to
they
ask
did.
you
They
why.
were the ones who were right.
Totally. I don't need to ask you why you
Yeah.
thought this was a good idea to make this podcast, but I was really curious about, and we know, of course, the timing and all of that, but I'm really curious as to your mindset when you set out to do it, because you could do it a whole bunch of different ways, and to dive into who we are as a country, as Canadians, how we relate to the United States. Did you have a set of ideals you wanted to achieve?
Well, I think kind of in a sense it was the opposite of ideals in that the producers and I, like, what we really wanted to do was come up with the sort of hard questions that Canada doesn't ask about itself. Like, I think we're a country that's always been happier being part of international systems, but after the Second World War, part of the American Empire, if you will, part of NATO, part of the Commonwealth, part of Francophonie, part of the World Trade Organization, and then before then we were just part of the British Empire. So we've never really had to ask ourselves hard questions like what happens if we're invaded? Like we literally have not asked that question. We've never asked ourselves like what happens if there is no international trade. And so these very like the practical kind of nasty questions of having a state and surviving as a state aren't ones that are really in the forefront of Canadian consciousness. And so we wanted to ask those questions. And often, the people we're talking to, they don't have any answers because they're starting to ask the questions for the first time too. And
Because
that's
it's new.
been really
Because
shocking.
it,
Yeah.
right. I think sometimes Canadians and many countries around the world get reminded of the fact that this is brand new. There are
Yeah.
people, very few, but there are some still alive who remember when Canada fought under their own flag for the first time. It's just that new.
Yeah, and I think it's even newer than that. I mean, like I was talking to a CSIS agent in the first episode, and he explained to me like, well, we don't have a spy service that goes into foreign countries.
Yeah.
Like we don't do that. And I was like, right, we haven't needed to do that. We've always had America. So like when we have a question about even things that are happening in our own borders, we ask the CIA. That's not possible anymore. Right, that's not something we can tolerate anymore. And so and also I think what we've liked to do is exist under the umbrella of American might and American power, and then we sort of do morality on top of that. We want to be good global citizens. We want to shape everything. We get to ask ourselves questions like, what should the world order be like? How do we help people? Now we have to ask questions like, are we strong enough to survive? How do we get strong enough to survive? These are questions that in every other country in the world are sort of the foundations of the country. And I think of Canada as a very beautiful house with sort of missing foundations. And I think asking those questions is actually going to be quite ugly and quite a big transition for us.
Yeah, and I think Canadians have to find a way to be honest with themselves because I think, as you know, and I'm sure, in the episodes I've heard, because a handful of them are available now, and there are more to come. If there's 8 episodes, is it going to be eight or
Yeah,
will there be
8
more?
episodes
Yeah,
in total. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I
Uh,
don't know if there'll be more. We might do more. There's been a huge response, so like I think these questions actually are pressing on Canadian minds. I think they really are.
you've written about this country in a few forms a lot in your career.
Hmm.
There is a tendency for a human being to focus on the tree rather than the forest, but you have been looking at the forest for a long time. What do you see that's really changed in this country?
In America, you mean, or in Canada?
No, in Canada, in Canada.
Well, in Canada, the change has been just so drastic. I mean, I think the past 6 months have been truly one of the biggest changes in the history of the country. I mean, in the final episode, I interview Margaret Atwood, and she says that the nationalism now is more intense than the nationalism in the '60s, which is an extraordinary fact,
Mhm.
right? And I think we've sort of woken up to a whole new world. I think there's certain things like it's small and subtle things like in a piece in the New York Times a couple of days ago, they referred to Canada as a power, a world power. I think that honestly is the first time we've ever been referred to that way in the New York Times. And I think the reason for that is that we are more important than we've ever been globally, and we are also we're more independent than we've ever been. We are going to be alone, no matter what happens. And that requires sort of thinking about our destiny that's really pretty foreign to us. I mean, I think it's really not the kind of thing we're used to thinking of at all.
Listened to the episode you did on the similarities and the differences between Canada and the U.S. and Ukraine and Russia. And
Mm,
if you take a look now, of course, there are many differences, very significant.
yeah,
But if you were to
yeah.
look at throughout history, have you seen examples of this before where Canadians can look to and say, there are lessons to be learned here, there are pitfalls to avoid?
When countries slide into authoritarianism, this is not it is incredibly common for them to look for war with their neighbors, particularly
Mhm.
with weak neighbors. War enables authoritarians to justify their authoritarianism, because I mean, one of the things about authoritarian, there's sort of this idea like, Mussolini made the trains run on time or whatever. They don't Life always gets worse under authoritarians. Things
Right.
never
In
work out
fact,
well.
in fact,
And
many people I know whose parents were in Italy at the time said they did not run on time.
yeah, they
It was
don't run
just
on
the
time.
myth.
Like yeah, because you don't have to respond to the public, you don't care
Yeah.
if the trains run on time, right? So things always get worse under authoritarian systems, and then they need an excuse. They need an
Mhm.
excuse to overthrow their own democratic norms, and war with a neighbor is a perfect excuse. So obviously, that's what everyone in Eastern Europe knows in their bones. Like, that's not just like today; that's like their entire history.
Mhm.
But also, that's what happens in South America. It is a almost traditional approach. So I think we've sort of believed that America was immune from these authoritarian impulses. That's proven not to be true. I don't think we should be at all confident that they're better angels of their natures will save us. Like, I think we absolutely need to think of them as we need to think through what happens if they become authoritarian and they threaten us, because they are becoming authoritarian and they are threatening us. And that, I mean, the consequences of that are just vast.
There's so much great work that they did to destabilize people's relationship with truth and fact, to seed enough dissent in enough areas where there might even have been grains of truth. So now you have a whole bunch of people who will sit and say, that'll never happen. This is posturing. This is that. But of course, everything is possible in a world as strange as the one we live in today.
Look, I wrote The Next Civil War. I started writing it in 2018. It was based on a magazine piece that I wrote for The
Yeah.
Walrus. When I submitted it to them, my editor said to me, "You can't really, I mean, it's all very well and good, but you don't actually believe America's in danger." I was like, "I do believe it's in danger." When I submitted the manuscript to my publisher, I'll never forget this. It was Simon and Schuster on Avenue of the Americas, Sixth Avenue in New York, where Fox News is. And I was like crossing the street in front of Fox News, and there were protesters outside, and a fight broke out, and I had to jump out of the way of this fist fight in front of Fox News. And I talked to my publisher, and he was like, "Well, the book's good and we like it, but you don't actually believe this is going to happen." I was like, "I just came from a fist fight outside your offices. Like, there is political violence literally on your doorstep." The human impulse to think that everything is going to work out is very profound, and it's been underway for at least a decade now, I think.
Mhm.
And it's just not like that's not a plan. hoping that everything's going to work out. It just isn't, especially when, the trends are really going one way in the United States and have been for a while.
Yeah, we hear an awful lot of people talk about the measurable markers about how the world is improving, how more people are getting out of poverty. And there's all these markers that we point to for sure. But I think what's happening here, I have spent a lot of time, I grew up in Canada. I spent a lot of time working around the world, certainly in the United States. And one thing is very apparent is that what's happening today, what gets talked about today, is really getting talked about because now it's happening to white people. Because if you grew up, especially in Los Angeles, if you're black and brown, this kind of experience has been commonplace. ICE raids in social media, it's a little bit more heightened it's a lot heightened, of course, I get that. But this has been the black experience in America for a long time. This has been the brown experience in America for a long time. This has been the indigenous experience in Canada. It had been for a long time. So versions of this is what I'm saying. The authoritarian, losing your rights, and I think that that's been a really interesting conversation to have, and I see it down in the United States with my friends who are not white, telling me this is just new to you guys.
Well, I think, racism, of course, is totally endemic to America and to, well, all societies broadly, I would say.
Mhm.
What you're seeing in America right now is a collapse of systems. So that's a major change. But also, I would say, the spectacular nature of the violence is new. Not necessarily because it's more violent, but because it shows the power of this moment in media. Like, we are dealing with a reality television president, and the
Yeah.
violence that they want is spectacular, right? And that has its own logic, which spirals out of control and accelerates much more quickly than, like, comparable incidences in American history, like the riots in the 60s and the racial violence in the late 60s. They're not, they burned out at a certain point under their own weight. This is not what is happening in this condition, right? I think they're, like, setting up alligator Alcatraz, like, that's new. Like, that's
Mhm.
not, that's not something that was experienced broadly in the 1990s by anyone,
No,
right? Like,
100%, 100%. But I think not. But to add to that, it's that um, there 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 have always been places where the systems have been designed to keep a certain group of people down. And so you're right, you're talking about the collapse of systems, but I'm not sure how much of it is the collapse of systems or just the reorganization of the systems, because there, again, having spent a lot of time in the United States, there are a lot of people who are on board with this. This is what's so interesting to
oh
me.
yeah,
There are a
no, they
lot of
want it.
people who go, "This is America."
Yeah. Yeah, they want it for sure. No. I think, the idea that this is some kind of, like, accident of history, that it's just Donald Trump, like, that's not
Mhm.
accurate. Like, I think the anti-government patriot movement. I mean, the time I spent writing the next Civil War, I was with a lot of anti-government patriot movements. I was a lot of prepper conferences. I was with a lot of white nationalists. Um, I became a kind of connoisseur of different kinds of racism, if you will, from the inside. And
Mhm.
it is hugely different. The kind that's new now, that I think is just, kind of unbelievable to me, is that there's a group of people who are they know that racism is nonsense, but they're doing it for their careers. Like, it is now a career benefit to be a racist, right? And
Do
I
you
mean,
mean
that's
like
incredibly low. Like, that's
yes,
incredibly low.
possibly the lowest, right?
Yeah.
Possibly like
I mean, I
what
think
I've
that,
seen.
well, it's a much lower than, like, a random racist in, some holler in,
Yeah.
South Carolina. Like,
Um,
it's much lower to me.
there are a lot of musicians who I knew 30 years ago in the beginnings of my career, and I watch what they do now and the rage bait and the race bait they do now. And I know that that's not the guy that I knew then. And I can't quite figure out if they've just changed or this is what you're talking about. And I think for some of them, it's both. For some of them, it's both.
They follow the algorithm,
Yeah.
right? I mean, they follow the algorithm, like, it's money. Like, it's incentives.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's I mean, that's what I think has really changed now. is that we're in a world that is, I mean, America is in a space that has actually incentivized political violence and
Yeah. No.
and spectacular violence, and that, that has consequences.
If you look at it from the Canadian perspective, one of the most incredible things I'd ever seen, and it's good or bad depending on your politics, is we were
Yeah.
going down that road politically. You could tell that, that same kind of mega stuff the Conservative Party and the leadership was pushing. There was a different, in fact, people, members of Poilievre's camp were seen wearing MAGA hats in photographs. Like they were doing a lot of the same, playing a lot of the same games at the very least,
Hmm.
vocally, verbally. And then once Trump started talking, there was, I've not seen a shift like this in my life where those kind of poll numbers went the way they went. The change happened the way it happened. By no means did Canada choose left over right, because there's a lot of people who say that what we have now politically is still right. But there was a real shift. Like Canada had to contend with what version they wanted the next phase of our time to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Trump is upending right wing politics everywhere in the world. The same thing happened in Australia, where
Yeah.
the Liberals, which is their Conservative Party, were set for a big win and they lost. Look what just happened in Brazil. Like Bolsonarism now is synonymous with hatred of Brazil. The
Yeah.
conservative papers are saying that. I mean, I don't think at this moment in our national history left or right mean very much. Right? Like I don't think they like I don't think those terms, I mean, the right in America, the hard right in America is in favor of tariffs and protectionism. That
It's
doesn't make any sense.
dude, we're living in the
Right?
upside
That
down.
doesn't like
Yeah, we're
yeah.
living in the upside down.
Yeah. Meanwhile, lefties, supposedly Canadian lefties, are we need the World Trade Organization and open markets for everyone, right? And
Mhm.
that open markets, globally open markets, has become now a hallmark of progressive politics, right? So the terms left and right, I literally think that's banned. That's like a badge that you wear to support a band. Like
Right.
it's not related to what you actually think policy should be or anything like that, and or what you hope for Canada. As for what happened with the Canadian right, it's very hard to know because they haven't talked to us for so long, right? They've been purely creatures of social media for a long time. They have not bothered to speak to people like me who would probably be much more receptive to them if they weren't just constantly in a rage, in a fury about some nonsense. And it just, that rage just made them seem incredibly impractical at a moment of maximum, need for unity, right? Like the moment for unity came and they had bet the house on division.
Right.
And so I don't know what that means. Like I don't know what that means for the future, especially when you consider that the
Right.
majority of young people in Canada supported conservatives.
It's what I wonder is because I remember, so just after 9/11, I was in the US and I was interviewing Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan told me you
Right.
can never trust any deal with the United States as it relates to trade, because, and I got a lot of grief from conservatives back home when I was doing my shows, because I was calling free trade out, because I knew what Pat Buchanan told me, which was you can never really actually trust any deal with us, because there will come a time where we'll just decide it's no longer in our best interest and we'll just break the rules. And so he had said that flat out, that Americans will break the rules. It'll just it'll just come down to personnel. Who's the one person that's going to decide to do it in a way that they did it? What I
Yeah.
wonder is, and then shortly thereafter, I interviewed Sarah Palin. And I remember how easy it was for people to make fun of Sarah Palin and the Tea Party movement. But if you look at what
Yeah.
happened in the post Oklahoma, you post Waco, into Oklahoma City bomber, into 9/11, into Tea Party, if you start to look at it with a big view, where the US is not really, like, you can't say it came out of nowhere. You could start to see things. So with the Canadian right, do you think that in that, like, because I think you're right about the moment of division, moment of unity, they went to division, but are enough seeds planted that we don't know where this country is going to go down the road?
Well, look, I mean, when I wrote The Next Civil War and I talked to all these experts on like where the divisions came from, I'm talking lots of them: environmental, the hyperpartisanship, the decline of the legal system, the inequality, right? The toxic levels of inequality that are
Yeah.
basically eating American capitalism from. I mean, the level of inequality is higher now than it was at the moment of the revolution, right?
Right.
So, like, trying to piece all these things together, try to synthesize all these systems into some kind of order that made sense. The date that kept coming up was 2008, right? Like the housing market crash was the beginning of the end of the American dream. It
Mhm.
made capitalism. It just made it much more brutal, and it was the beginning of the breakdown. 2008. We didn't really have 2008. We still have a very active middle class in this country. I mean, one of the craziest statistics about Canada, people don't really realize because we don't think of our country as having an identity. We don't really
Mhm.
recognize how weird we are. 76% of Canadian women have a tertiary degree.
Yeah.
That's nutso. That's like wacko. 3 out of 4 Canadian women that you see walking down the street, they all have a higher degree.
Yeah.
That's huge. That just creates a different society that politics comes out of. So I think also, Canadian politics is not anywhere near as identity based as American politics. I mean,
Right.
you've
Yeah.
had this experience. I covered the 2015 Canadian election. Then I went down for the Guardian and covered a Trump rally and a Sanders rally in 2016. Canadian politics is, sir, we need to spend $28 million on education. No, you're absolutely crazy. It needs to be $32 million in education. You go
Mhm.
down to America, it's God, it's socialism. No one talks about numbers. They all talk about these grand visions.
Mhm.
An American president is a representative of the people in a way that a Canadian prime minister is not. Canadian prime minister is just a servant. We've hired Mark Carney to do a job.
Yeah.
When he's done with
Although,
his job, he'll be done.
although you did
But
write, I think I
that's a big
remember
difference.
it is a huge difference, but I do remember you wrote, and
Yeah.
it would have been about 10 years ago now, you had said that Stephen Harper had
Yeah.
contributed to the subtle darkening of Canadian life. And as you know, the lights don't just get switched off. The darkening is a process. So there are definitely, it's not that we are immune to it. I think that maybe there's got to be, we just have to remain diligent about maintaining these kinds of important factors you're talking about.
Well, I mean, I think, one of the things that was so shocking to me doing these interviews is like how naive we are. Like we do not, it is very hard to explain to Canadians that people are out to harm them,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, America turning and betraying us, America is the threat, but the actual real danger is that without American protection, we're naked, right? Like Russia, China, even Iran, they take shots at us and our information networks all the time because there's zero consequences for them. We don't have a foreign service that can do that. But not only that, we don't really have a way to protect ourselves from it because we just don't even think it's something that is going to happen. This naivete needs
Yeah.
to end. This is the reason I made the podcast is to say, look, the time for that naivete is over. Like we need to
I
realize
agreed.
people are trying to harm us, and we have to take steps to make sure they don't harm us. And those
Agreed.
steps are
Agreed.
going to be ugly.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot. Here's the thing about Trump and the American view of Canada and how it shifted. They're right about a lot of things, and that if we aren't a country, if you are a country that cannot defend yourself, are you a country? And history is littered with stories of
Yeah.
countries that don't exist anymore. So no country has the right to exist. Country has to keep its ability to exist. And if we have been, my friends who work in military bases now tell me about the horror show of the technology that we have now. It's not a real thing of the Canadian
Yeah.
military as an institution, right? The
Yeah.
way the way it needs to be in this new, and now you've got people on the left and in the middle talking about things like we need a military, which is again back to the upside down.
Well, the episode 5, the one that
Yeah.
comes out next week, is a case for a whole society defense, right? That's what Finland does. That's what
Yeah, yeah,
Poland does. That's what Estonia does. Korea, South Korea, like, and that, it's interesting because people think of that as conscription, like sending your sons off to learn how to fire a gun.
yeah,
But it's also teaching old ladies how to do CPR and how and like and I think and the reason they do that, when you interview the Finns, they're under no illusions that Russia couldn't take them if they wanted. What they know, though, is that if Russia tries to take them, it'll be very, very expensive and painful for Russia, right? And that by preparing, they're actually decreasing the chances of that enormously. And I
yeah,
honestly think the left-wing arguments for something like national service, well, as I said, I don't think it makes it's not really left or right. We need a process that is going to integrate our incredibly racially diverse, geographically diverse, politically diverse groups into some kind of political unity, because otherwise there's a huge other force that will shape them, called the internet, that will spiral them all out of control very quickly, and we need to take steps to prevent that from happening. Now, that would be a total national reordering. I mean, imagine, George, if you and I had to go to the military when we were 19 for 2 years. I mean, Jesus
I
Christ.
did.
Like,
I did.
pity the
I
country. Like,
I
but
totally. But here's the thing: I did join, and then I left
did
very
you?
quickly. I was because I was one of those kids. I was one of those kids who had no future, right? No job, no education,
Right.
nothing. So, and I just thought, yeah, I'll do this. And then I got in there, and I thought, wow, I am not good with discipline. This is not. This is not for me.
But if everyone had been doing it, if
Yeah,
every person who was in a band was doing it, if
yeah,
every weirdo poet was doing it,
yeah.
maybe you would have felt differently, right? Like, maybe if it hadn't been like only guys who are obsessed with guns are there,
Right,
like
right.
you would have, right? Like you would have felt
I think you're
differently
right.
about it.
Hey, listen,
Yeah.
I think about John Prine's view of the working person, right, and Prine's view of the soldier, and there. And if you don't have poets, I spoke to General Romeo Dallaire about this. You can't lose your poetic heart. You can't lose your poetic heart because
John
if you lose
Prine
that,
to
you're
Romeo Dallaire. We have just reached peak Strombo. That is John Prine to Romeo Dallaire in one sentence. You win, man. Like, quit. Take off the headphones. Go have a beer. You'll
bro.
fulfilled your destiny.
Bro, I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer, and I have, by the way, a long time ago. I'm so grateful for it. But I am a big believer that if we actually looked at a country not as a thing to protect, but as a promise to try to achieve, that we have an opportunity to build something really beautiful. And I think Canada is a weird experiment. And I'm from the, and what I haven't quite figured out, and I would love your insight on this as a Canadian, because I grew up in a Canada that I did not see reflected back in Canadian media. I did not hear it. I didn't read it. I didn't listen to it on the radio. I grew up as the first generation Canadian. Everybody in my neighborhood is from immigrant families. So the
Yeah.
Canada that people talk about, the Hockey Night in Canada, Canada is not the Canada I grew up in. I grew up in the west side of Toronto in ethnic neighborhoods. So, but
Right.
what I can't figure out yet is if what we had when things were getting better into in that weird Thatcher, Mulrooney, Reagan era, how it led to the 90s, the Berlin Wall fell, Mandela was going to be free, apartheid was going to end at least in South Africa. And I can't tell if our optimism and the things that were getting better was a blip or if we're in the blip now. That's what I can't tell is we're
Oof.
was our trajectory right, or did we just Gen Xers, another reason to hate us is we caught an amazing window of where things were actually going to get better.
I think we caught the worst window. We caught the window where you could see, like, do you remember in the 90s when the primary worry was apathy? Like, people aren't politically engaged enough. Like, I want to go back to that. Let's go back to, like, you and I sitting here talking about John
Yeah,
Prine and not like,
yeah,
who are our sons going to have to be conscripted? Like,
yeah.
that's the journey we've been on, right?
But no,
Like,
but maybe it's because I think I'm older than you. Is that we grew up in the threat of nuclear annihilation and AIDS.
yeah,
And
and that's
Reaganomics.
true too.
And that set the
Yeah,
90s up where we went, oh fuck, we survived it. Okay, you're right. Maybe we
yeah,
can just be apathetic and watch Soderbergh films, and life will be better if we just worried about the politics of the
yeah.
heart. You know.
Let's do some Soderbergh films. Let's like be obsessed with that rather than like Donald Trump. That sounds great
Yeah,
to
like the
me.
Sweet
Look,
Hereafter, like watching Adam McGowan films were pretty great.
yeah, yeah. I mean, here's what I would say. I don't know. I mean, it goes to the beginning of your question because I mean, I think one thing that this has been very revealing about this for me is that I, like you, I was born in a suburb of Edmonton, very multicultural, the most multicultural place I've ever lived in. And I lived in London, and I lived in New
Yeah.
York, and like, and I live in Toronto right now, and I still think the most multicultural place I ever lived was
Mhm.
the neighborhood I grew up in Edmonton. I am a multiculturalist to my bones. And I think another one of the weird things about Canada that we don't think about is that it's the only country in the world where the more patriotic you are, the more you believe in multiculturalism. Right? The more like our patriotism is a patriotism of difference. Right? And I
For
think
some,
when we
for
see,
some.
well, look, there's lots of different kinds of patriotism, but like
Yeah.
when you actually, people who believe in Canada, people who
Mhm.
want Canada to survive, people who think Canada is a good idea, they believe in multiculturalism, right? The
Mhm.
people who don't believe in Canada, who think Canada's dying, who hate Canada, who think they don't believe in multiculturalism. So
Mhm.
that's a very important distinction from any European country, and certainly from America. I mean, as we see the American collapse, and it is a form of white supremacy. I think that we're seeing very nakedly. Like
Yes,
I don't think it
I
can be
agree.
described meaningfully any other way.
I agree.
Like overt. And the Canadian rejection is a rejection of that, right? And so that in itself is hopeful. Do you know what I mean? Like I
Yeah,
don't necessarily
like
I'm not the person who goes with
we're doubling down on the thing that we actually think is the good thing and the optimistic thing about us.
exactly. And like that, and that's what it's become very clear to us all that that's what we want. Right? Like with what with despite its problems, despite everything else, that's what we want. I don't really think that anxiety or hope are really the way to think about this. Or like the question is, what is the correct approach to this particular moment? And I think the approach
Yeah.
for us is very simple: to prepare.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we've got to prepare for, not necessarily an America that is in an invasionary force, but certainly an America that is in retreat, an America that is much weaker than any America that we've ever known, and certainly an America that's not going to protect us in any way, right? So,
I
like,
agree.
those are the steps that we need to take. Like, and I mean, I think I actually, because I deal with these scenarios, these like I would say they're these models that show destruction, right? Like, and talking with the people who do that, I feel like when I feel hope, when I feel optimism, it's probably based on something because I'm so usually going the other way. I'm so usually running the exact other way, and I do feel optimistic about Canada. I do.
Have
I
you
think we're. I
changed?
think we're.
Have you changed? Have you like how have you grown um as a member of this, you know, strange country? Because it is a strange, weird experiment in a lot of ways. How have you grown in the last X amount of episodes that you've recorded?
Well, I think you know. I think it's sort of my work life has been so America focused, right?
Mhm.
I mean, partly that was because Canada really didn't have time for me. But like, I was a columnist at Esquire for 8 years. And then, I just came from writing a novel with Andrew Yang, right? Like co-writing a novel with Andrew Yang. And, I write for the Atlantic and the New Yorker and the New York Times
Mhm.
and all this stuff. And this is where my sense of my value as a creative individual has come from. I don't feel that anymore.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I want to think about what Canada is. I want to write for Canadians. I want to this show. I mean, this show we're like to Joe Rogan in Canada, but it's a Canadian show. It's not going to have
Right.
anywhere near the reach of other projects that I've done for Audible or something like that. And I just don't care.
Right.
Like I mean, like I'm gonna be working on what it means to be a Canadian. What and I also feel like I don't know if you feel this because you live in LA but like there's a part of me that has less respect for everything that comes out of America now. It's even the people in its pop culture, even in the people that like, even the people I admire and respect, these institutions I respect. But it's like, if this is what you're coming from, how valuable can it be? Do you know what I mean? Do you
I
feel that?
do. I have largely and a long time felt I came here when I was 18 because I read that Neil Young did, right? So I said, well, if Neil can do it, I'm going to do it. But I've always lived in Toronto will always be home to me, but I've largely believed that the US over delivers for a long time on scripted and under delivers on unscripted. I just don't think it's a
How
particularly
true.
right because and to you know your
Yeah,
point about how the some of the fundamental differences between us and them with the multiculturalism and the white supremacy, even though many Indigenous people I know in Canada feel the same way about Canada's history in white supremacy,
sure.
it's the fundamental difference in my mind, having spent enough time talking to them, is God and guns. It is the Bible
Yeah.
Belt because the Bible Belt is a very well funded base because they know there's enough of them to vote that they can actually shift. So the Bible Belt will choose heaven if that means they have to throw everybody else under the bus. They don't care because this world's not their home. They're just a passing through, as the hymn says. And I was raised in a very religious home. So I see the impact religion has on this country. And I'm a big believer in the so-called good religious people are the very few. The majority of them are happy just to
Well,
get to the afterlife, right? So I think it's a really
well,
big
that,
difference. But so all of the stuff they make all the stuff they make, I see it through that lens. That this is a group of people who can't really tell the truth because it's not a country that is designed to tell the truth. It's a country designed to reinforce myths. It's a mythological country more than a truth-telling country. Whereas I look at the
yeah.
UK and the histories, and I think they tell better truths there. And Canada, to be honest with you, is somewhere in the middle, and I'd like us to get us more to the truths and less the mythology.
Well, I've always thought Canada was a country that disillusioned you. I mean, for better or for worse, right? It's
For
a
the
country
creative,
that
yes.
strips away your illusions. You know, well, I mean, yeah, like what the Alice Munro story collection, they had to change the title in America. It was called "Who Do You Think You Are" in Canada. Everyone here got that, right? Everyone here knew exactly what Alice Munro was talking about
Yeah,
with the title called, "Who Do You Think You Are?" But I want to run an idea by you because I've been thinking
yeah.
about this, like like in terms of masculinity, like I've always like Canadian, the difference between American and Canadian masculinity to me is that I was thinking about this even among like never mind the like this is true among the hockey night in Canada
Yeah,
crowd and the
yeah, yeah.
multicultural crowd too. In Canada, a man, a really valuable man, a manly man, is a man who can endure shit, who is tough, who can take a beating,
Mhm.
who can like go into the wilderness and take a beating, whereas in America a manly man is someone who can give a beating, right, who can like provide violence, and that's across classes and across aesthetics and
Mhm.
across a lot of other things, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
wonder if we're going to find out we have more identity than we think we do,
Uh,
is what I'm thinking.
I 100% think we do. And I built my career around telling these kinds of stories to remind people that it's not just who we are in Canada, but what we represent around the world is a real thing. I don't think we are as a country do things around the world the same way we used to. We're not the blue
Yeah,
helmets country we used to be by any means, but we, Pearson and the peacekeepers, but we absolutely have identity. And I think sort of maybe the Irish we have outkicked the coverage on incredible poets and storytellers that know exactly what our identity is and that our identity doesn't have to be one thing. In the US, you fit into one or two groups and that's it. And then, of course, there's
yeah,
nuances within everything. Absolute statements are good for what we do for a living, but they're dangerous sometimes. But I think that the thing about my favorite thing about growing up as a Canadian was I didn't have to think about it. I just knew what it
mm,
was, and I
yeah,
loved it. And so I do believe we have way more identity. The masculinity thing is neat because I think we're usually 10 years behind the US, but with the melting Gulf Stream that is social media, I don't know if those timelines will
yeah,
hold anymore, right? But
right,
yes, I definitely think
yeah.
that Zen upper lip kind of up in the attic kind of version of, you know what it is? Listen, man, here's my provocative point of view. It's
Yeah.
bootlicker country music post 9/11 that turned this country where you the genre that gave you Chris Christopherson and Willie and Johnny to a degree doesn't do that
Mhm.
anymore. It doesn't build them up the way they used to.
Yeah.
Everybody falls in line here, and and men particularly fall in line. But then you have your Chapo Trap House group, you have your Pod Save America group, you have your little subcultures, but generally
Yeah.
speaking, you're American first. No matter what your ethnicity is, you're American top to bottom. I can see it, and they'll tell me they're not, but I can see it. And in Canada,
Well,
yeah, we don't identify the same way, I don't think.
I was always amazed when I was going and interviewing people for the next Civil War, where like everyone worshipped the Constitution. Like they worshipped it like it was a religious document. But it would be like you go and talk to like a New York Times editor, like he worshipped it as like a
No.
religion. They were doing Talmud on it. Then you go and talk to a Texas separatist, right? Like, and he is like, oh, America's not living up to its constitution anymore. That's why we need to separate. I was like, Quebec separatists are not out here saying we need to live up to the spirit of the BNA Act.
Yeah, I know.
Like the Quebec separatists are like, no, we don't want to have anything to do with any of
Yeah.
this, right? Like that's much more logical. And it was just astonishing to me that it has essentially become this religious document, like the Bible,
Mhm.
where any interpretation is possible, right? Like the interpretation that comes out of it is simply, it's definitely whatever frame of reference you're bringing to it, that's the meaning that you'll
Mhm.
get out of it.
Yeah. Well,
And
this is it.
and
That's it. You're right.
but but it's that unity is so nonsensical. Whereas in Canada, I mean, I think the multicultural thing, like that's one dimension of the history of the country, the contemporary one. I mean, when we started, that's the beginnings of multiculturalism, right? That was the institution as a policy. Like that was the beginnings. Now, like I'm in Toronto. It's 50% foreign born. This is an open
Yeah.
city, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what it is, right? But even before then, we were always a polyphonous country, right? We always had multiple languages. We always had, 617 indigenous languages, right? Like we always had those realities to contend with
Hmm.
that of multiplicity and an attempt to arrive at some kind of tolerance that would permit multiplicity to survive. I think even in the most brutal, well, that's probably not true around the time of Confederation, but before then and after then, there actually were serious attempts to do that. that
Right.
is that to me is a very important political distinction, right? Like and so like the difference between what is happening in America and a future for Canada, like I think there's some shelter for us in
Yeah.
these realities.
I think also I agree with you on that 100%. I also think that so many of the waves of immigration to Canada when we were growing up were either connected to leaving war, to
Right.
avoiding some kind of oppression, to getting to
Yeah.
a place where we can actually build. I think the difference is the inhale versus the exhale. You get into the United States and you have to inhale and hold your breath, and you get to Canada and there's a bit of an exhale. And
Right.
I like that for a lot of people who've come from around the world. Again, we say these absolute statements, recognizing that
Yeah,
people
yeah.
have different
You're just
different things.
generalizing, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To make the
understood.
point,
Yeah.
but I do believe I do believe firmly that Canada, uh, again, like you, man, you study, you travel, countries go
Yeah.
away unless people figure out a way to make it not go away. And I'm really curious to see
Correct.
what we do in the next 3 or 4 years in this country.
Well, it's very, I mean, I think the challenge is going to be, I actually don't think the challenge is in the Canadian people. I think we have these institutions, and this is not to criticize them. This is
Yeah.
not like, this sounds critical, but it's not to criticize them. That they've been based for 80 years. Success in these institutions has been based on integrating with the United States and with the larger world. That's true of our diplomatic corps. It's true of our military is elites who plug and play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interoperability is the name of the game. That's why we have these incredible soldiers who are built for missions in Afghanistan. But it's also true culturally. Like
Yeah.
even the small case of like, why am I successful in Canada? It's because I wrote for these American places, right? Like and that's, I was rewarded for that. I was rewarded for going to New York. I was rewarded for all of that stuff, right? And now we're going to have to turn. And that's why there's this huge impulse, huge inertia in the institutions themselves to think we're just going to keep our heads down until Trump's gone, and then everything will go back to normal, and we'll go back to being best friends with America, and Daddy America will take care of us. That,
Mhm.
my one mission in my recent writing is to dispel that notion, right? Like I think that is a incredibly dangerous idea. Like I think, and when you combine that with this necessary slowness of bureaucracy, that's nobody's fault.
Hmm.
That's just reality,
Yeah.
and and human inertia. It's a really, really potently dangerous combination. And I think the question for this country is: will we overcome that? Will our
Right.
institutions overcome that?
Well, as you know, there are a lot of people who I was just listening to somebody yesterday. I forget who it was now. Oh, it was Michael Pollan. It was actually not Michael Pollan, Michael Lewis. And Michael Lewis was
Oh
talking
yeah.
because he had done that whole book on bureaucracy in the United States and all that. And I've gotten to know Michael a little bit over the years, and his thinking is that the Trump thing, Trumpism dies when Trump's gone because he doesn't think that JD Vance or anybody else in the wings has the same dynamic ability to reach people the way Mr. Trump does. And so there are a bunch of people who are just trying to wait it out, to your point, in the United States as well. And that, as you say, could be perilous.
Well, look, I take his point. Like I remember interviewing an operative when I was doing this book with Andrew Yang, and we were talking about Kerry Lake, who was trying to do imitation
Yeah.
Trumpism in Arizona. And I was like, "Do you think this is going to work?" And he was like, "Look, Trump has hardcore pornography. You can't fake it. You can't like he said you can pretend to do it, but like no one else really can do what he does. He's hardcore,
Hmm.
and everyone else is like trying to pretend to do it. But I mean, the point of the next civil war, the whole point of that book is that when you talk to the experts on what civil the consequences of inequality, the consequences of the delegitimization of legal institutions, the consequences of decline of trust. I mean, and also, you know, America's about to become a majority country. Like white people are not about to be the majority of Americans, right? Like
Hmm.
wherever that happens in the world, that's not a white person thing. That's a human thing. Wherever that
Yeah.
happens, but there's violence. There's political
Right.
violence, right? So like Trump is irreplaceable. He is unique, one of a kind. But the systematic decline of the United States he is really just a symptom of that. He is not a
All right.
cause of it.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah,
You wrote this book, with the wink in the title, the death of an author, I'm, general AI. Whenever this happens,
yeah.
where, how big a
It will never
role?
happen, but yeah.
I don't think it will either. Honestly, I think it's just
No,
a
no, it's not.
scam for them to fucking raise money. They're just a scam to get investments. I think they'll have
Behind
impact, but not like
scratch a
that.
doomer, find a booster. That's the line. Scratch a doomer, find a booster. I mean, that's
Essentially,
what they say. That's what they
yeah.
say, right? And it's
But
true.
you did spend time in that world, like understanding it.
Yeah,
Just as an aside, what was the first prompt you
yeah.
gave? Because what was the first prompt you gave to work on the novel?
Well, I gave very elaborate prompts, right? Like, and I was working with multiple LLMs. So I was working with GPT 4.5, I think then.
Hmm.
I had access to an earlier one, and then I was working with Cohere, which is a
Right,
large language model company from Toronto, where I was actually able to work with engineers who were able to create models for me. And we've been
right,
like, you know, the first AI generated story I wrote was in 2017 for Wired, and then
yeah.
I published other ones in LA Review of Books and a few other places. Um, the prompts are, I mean, the single prompt for a passage of say 800 words would have been like yay long.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure of getting it. Like it would have been like incredibly elaborate syntactical lexical detail,
Hmm.
as well as the point. I mean, I've been working with AI creatively since prehistory, basically. At this point, no AI has ever given me a good idea for a story. You have to give it ideas, right?
Hmm.
It is an amazing style machine, but like the idea that it's going to end creativity, like if your creativity can be ended by AI, you shouldn't be doing it.
Dude,
Honestly,
100%, 100%. Listening to
yeah,
the AI generated songs, they sound great, professional
yeah.
songs. They sound just like shit pop songs anyway. AI will never make Eddie vedder.
Oh
Like as a
no,
person,
or
as a
John
person that
Prime.
we,
Never mind
yeah,
fucking John Prime,
yeah, that's
right?
right. A person we
Like
care about.
yeah. Yeah, like it can't do it. It can't even do it. It could maybe aspire to do Eddie Vedder,
Right.
but the John Prines of this world are totally safe.
Okay, but let me ask you this question though, because we're basing this opinion on what we value. So if like musicians don't matter the way they used to matter in what to some people. There was a time when all your leaders were were musicians. So we've seen
Yeah.
that shifting. So the value we place on a prime will matter to just a small group of us possibly. And over time, it'll look anime and Marvel and CGI and auto tune. Maybe these are all just, the audience has been telling us for years they don't really care about the actual accomplishment.
Look, you and I have seen the same cultural process. We've been I mean, I know you've been reporting on it forever. We have gone from a mainstream culture where everybody
Yeah.
watched the same shows to 7 million niches,
Yeah.
including political niches, included niches of fact, including niches of, but like, you know, I mean, there's all of these artistic worlds are going to be tiny.
Yeah.
And that process has nothing to do with AI. There's
Yes.
absolutely nothing to do with artificial intelligence. It has to do with social media. It has to do with a bunch of other things. I mean, I will say, as someone who has had two teenagers in my house, it is fascinating to me that the Smiths always survive. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I really thought like, oh, who would give a shit about the Smiths? That's like my
Yeah.
music. No, 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 no. Like 14-year-olds are absolutely familiar with and Fleetwood Mac and Mazzy Star. I mean,
Oh
Mazzy's
God.
all
Yeah.
these like all these like little 13-year-old girls hanging around with my daughter. Can we listen to Cry Cry by Mazzy Star? Okay. Like, I mean,
You've got a
you know
good
what I mean?
house, man. You've got a good
Yeah,
house.
we've got a house of Mazzy Star. We're in this house. We believe in Mazzy Star. We
Listen,
should have a poster on the front. Yeah.
in this house, I believe in it as well. I for sure. So okay, to wrap up on gloves off, which of course is our play on elbows up, but the which I think is great. The Are you a protectionist, by the way? Now is this a shift in
No,
you? No.
no, no, no. I mean, look, I want it. I'm a multiculturalist who wants to live in an international world of peace and money like that.
Right.
I'm not a complicated guy. Like like the West Toronto people that you grew up with. Like I'm sure we all want the same thing. We want to live in a world where we're moving around, experiencing other cultures,
Hmm.
buying weird, incredibly expensive mangoes from some that's the world that I want to live in. I don't want to live in a world where like somebody cares about where the copper came from.
Right.
No, I mean, we need to look after ourselves and our national interests 100%, and we need to do it with great strength, and we need to actually figure out how to be strong, which is not a question we're used to asking and is an ugly question. But
Hmm.
a world of openness is, I mean, I still don't understand how we lost it, since it's so obviously superior to a world that's closed off from itself. I mean, it's just so obvious to me that a world of exchange and a world of movement between places is infinitely superior to a world where everyone's locked in these cells of their own countries. I mean, that to me is like just so. How did we lose cosmopolitanism? I mean,
Is
how
the
did we
is
lose it? Like,
is the answer the same as it's always been? Follow the money, and who benefits from
could
it?
be. I mean, certainly when I was doing that book with Andrew Yang, I asked him, okay, we're writing this novel about like political, like what are the most important moments in a campaign? And he was like, first quarterly report, second quarterly fundraising report, third quarterly fundraising report. Those are the most important days. It's like,
Crazy.
and then everyone you talk to, they are fundraisers. Like when you
Mhm.
see Gavin Newsom on some podcast, you have to understand that as a fundraising activity, right? Just as much, and I mean that's why the Trump stuff, like using meme coins to take bribes from foreign governments, is like it's not out of the realm of what other people
Yeah.
are doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the bribery has already been in place for a long time for everybody. So I mean that's one possible answer, but it doesn't seem to me to explain it. I mean I just don't because it's everywhere, right? You see the same thing in India, you see the same
Hmm.
thing in all over Asia, you see it in Africa, right? You see like the movement against refugees in South Africa. You see it all over Europe. I mean, Sweden is bragging about how they're
Yeah.
throwing out immigrants, right? Sweden, right? Like, and we're Canada's the last pro-immigrant country on earth,
Hmm. And
right?
they tried to
Like,
change that.
And I think we have to preserve that. I mean, at all costs. To me,
Yeah.
like I mean
I think,
that is the essence of Canada to me.
I think, when I think the systematic 100+ year dismantling of the education system and devaluing taking care of another person has become, uh, probably plays a significant role in this. I hear lots of people saying that people are just brainwashed. They don't know at some point where's the personal accountability for the voter. I think it's a complex thing. We should do another conversation so we can get into that then. Um, but
Yeah.
I think the
I
thing
am
that we
curious
have
to
to,
hear your
yeah,
thoughts. I mean, like you've seen this
I have
stuff the
many. Yeah,
same as me, and you've been
yeah,
close up to it too, right? And it's
yeah.
cultural. Like I was a pop culture columnist at Esquire, and that's where it was analyzing pop culture that I saw all of this happening,
Yes, this is
right?
it. So I believe the canary in the coal mine has often been in the pop culture. You can look at how, to me, you can tell the demise of America just by looking 15 years ago at what the stand-up comics were doing. You could hear the
Yeah.
dumbness and the misogyny and the closed-mindedness masquerading as, oh, you can't take a joke. Right? You could see, and again, I'm not saying I'm a big freedom of expression absolutist for the most part. I guess I'm
Yeah.
not absolutist because I'm against some things if they contravene hate laws. But I believe in freedom of expression, and you could see what was happening in pop culture. But dude, I remember interviewing people at Much Music the day before 9/11 and the day after, and it was the lights went off on any irony, but not just that, the lights went off on any critical thinking the next day. The next
Yeah.
day, and it was dramatic, and it's never
Yeah.
recovered.
Yeah. I mean, I think the date they kept bringing up to me was 2008, as I said. I mean, I
It's,
think like September 11th, obviously. I mean, the other thing that was so amazing about September 11th, when you think about it in this context, is that it was a pop culture event, right? I mean, not
yeah.
to diminish the death or anything like that, but it was an act of spectacular violence, right? Like
Yes.
it was an assault on the media center
Yeah.
of the United States, right? And that had enormous consequences, right?
Yeah.
Like, but you can see all of this stuff unspooling from that. It's funny because we have a reality television president. All of his group are like talking heads, but still, when you go to opinion pages and you go to like critical political reading, no one is really capable of processing entertainment as a political force, right? Even though it's so it's not even, it's like he became president because he played president on television. And
Mhm.
meanwhile, that's also how Zelensky became president of Ukraine, right? Like, and we're there's some way that the critics of this find that beneath their dignity to think about these mass cultural events, and it's really led us into a terrible blindness, like a terrible
Kid,
blindness about the movement of our politics.
Kid Rock opening up an assault rifle on a couple cans of beer because it had a trans person on it had a
Right.
huge impact on the share price. It had a huge impact, and it was a fucking nothing. It was a
Yeah.
nothing,
Sure.
a can of beer, right? And people, yeah, again, like, I don't know if we're in the blip or we lived in the blip, but I hope this is the blip.
Well, it's all blips, buddy. Well, it's all
Yeah, maybe you're
blips.
right. It's a blips, but it's
I
just
mean,
yeah, a bevy of blips.
it's a bevy. I mean, like, I don't think there's an order here. Like, I think
Yeah,
it's a
Mr.
blip after
Voter.
blip after blip, and then you're dead. And people say, "What was his blip?" Like
Well,
I think that's the way it goes. Yeah,
if you were to do a season two of Gloves Off, uh, having covered, because you're covering very significant, um, difficult conversations Canadians need to have, but in a true Canadian
yeah.
fashion, the what now will come next. What would a season two of this, and how do you think? Like, I'm curious about how you, as you close out these four people, I think four are up when they hear the next ones. Um, what we're leaning towards, because you are I think at your core, like you'd said, you're being more optimistic now. Like, you're running towards hope in a different way than you might have a bunch of years ago. So what are you hopeful that this is going to come together?
Well, what I'm really hopeful is I think the Canadian people get it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's an amazing statement to make.
Yeah.
And I think they get it broadly. They get it in Quebec. They get it in West Toronto. They get it.
Yep.
I think that then if I were to do another season, it would be I would try to talk first of all to more ordinary Canadians about what they're doing. We went really for the expert, like
Yeah.
the leading experts on all of these questions, because we felt that these questions had not been and they need answering,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We wanted the best possible answers. I think I would probably talk to more ordinary Canadians about their feelings about it. I mean, we did
Hmm.
some of that, but like I think I would make it more of a focus. And then I think I would talk to the people in the institutions. Like, we were just starting a podcast. Like we were like, "Hi, it's Stephen. Can you come on the show,
Yeah.
Margaret Atwood?"
Tomorrow.
Well, I've got nothing to do. Yeah, okay. But I think now that we have, people are listening. Like,
Yeah.
we have a real audience.
Yeah.
Like I think we would be entitled to ask, leading generals, leading members of
Mhm.
CSIS, leading political figures to what are your plans? What are you doing? And hold them to a little bit of account for it, which is not
Agreed.
really what we've been doing for this. But like I mean, I also on the other hand, I don't really like the kind of journalism where you just go and attack people. Like I think these people are in these institutions are faced with extraordinary complicated situations that
Mhm.
they have no familiarity dealing with. Put yourself in their shoes. What a nightmare. Like
Yeah.
you're a 45-year-old diplomat in Germany. Your whole career has been built on the fact that you can get invited to American diplomatic functions and you can talk to people in American diplomatic circles who can tell you what's going on at NATO. Now you're on your own. You've got to figure out what to do with other countries. It's a huge order.
Mhm.
It's a huge order. And I think that's across the board. I think that's in the military. I think it's in our security apparatus. I think it's true of even of our business leaders. I mean, our business leaders are trying to figure out how the hell to get out of this, right? And that's a when you've been rewarded for integrating with American systems for 80 years, that's a big ask. I think you're going up to Canada to do a cross country thing about Canadian storytellers. You would not be doing that if this had not happened with if Donald Trump had not threatened to annex people. We're all making changes, and I'd like to see how and to what end and how they're going. That's what I would do.
But I think you and I have built careers doing it long before it became the cause celeb, right? Because I think we have been talking about the human condition, and
Yeah,
I think you're right about this. Is that now people are willing to throw money at it to pay for it, and I know that with Trump's big beautiful bill passing, whatever that is, the which is neither of those things, but there is, to your point, I've talked to some very big companies in Canada whose entire business was based on how to do the US, and now and
they're
they're
fucked.
doubling down on
Yeah,
investment in Canada. And it's so we have this amazing opportunity. I think you actually settled on the magic word in this whole conversation, which is institutions. And that if you have solid institutions with real oversight, not the kinds that get away with whatever they want, but real
accountability.
institutions, big time, that's what keeps the country rolling. I appreciate your time. I hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Real fun talking to you.
Likewise.